You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 95 Podcast. This is Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network. So glad you joined us today. This is one of our first podcasts of the new year of 2024. And as you probably do it in your ministry or wherever you're leading, you probably like to kind of set things up and kind of lay out a track of where you're going, what the path is going to be moving forward. And that's kind of what today's podcast is about. I have with me today one of my 95 Network teammates, Jason Allison. And Jason helps us in a lot of capacities, but specifically Jason helped really format our soul care essentials concept, if you will. And we'll talk in a few minutes about how that came about. But first, Jason, how are you doing today?
I am doing great.
Well, you sound great too, from one podcaster to another. And if you're listening right now and you have not listened to the Church Talk podcast, I will include it in the show notes. You need to check it out because Jason and then his co-host Rob are they're quite fun fellas. So, what's happening in Ohio today? Anything good going on?
It's Ohio. It's winter. Do I need to say anything else?
No, you don't really. We had when I was first, Gina, when we first married, we had a pastor change at our church, and the pastor that came was from Ohio, and they basically said that it turns cloudy in October, and you don't see the sun again until April.
Yeah, that's about right.
Oh yeah. Lord, that'd be awful. Well, take a few minutes, Jason, kind of update everybody on who you are, what you're doing, because you wear a lot of hats, and then we'll take a few minutes and dive into the soul care essentials.
Oh, yeah. Well, Dale, you and I first met 5 years ago, at least, I think. I can't remember exactly the date.
At this time now, it's probably 6.
6, yeah. I not to, butter up the host here, but, you were truly a lifesaver in a lot of ways. I reached out to you and you became my coach. And, I was in a pretty dark spot at the time. And so I have appreciated our friendship because that coaching relationship grew and now we've become good friends. And that really has been a blessing in my life. And that's why I have such a heart for 95 Network and just everything that we do with small churches and medium-sized churches. And honestly, we're starting to connect with some larger churches too. I mean, good content is good content. It doesn't matter who it was written for. So I went through some dark times in ministry, just trying to figure things out, leadership mistakes that I made, and then things that were done to me. So I'm not going to blame everything on everybody else. But in the same breath, after everything was said and done, I was pretty beat up and wounded. But in the process, God really worked in me and showed me, hey, this is what you were really created to do. And that is really to come alongside and help other leaders achieve their God-given dreams. Mm-hmm. And so I've been really focused for the last few years on figuring out what that looks like, how I can come alongside leaders. And that means I handed the reins of my church plant over to a new church planter. We kind of closed the one chapter and then relaunched as a new church. And so I've been able to walk alongside him and just help him develop as a pastor and as a leader. I also work with our denomination, our church planning network called Converge. We're in the Mid-Atlantic District. I'm the director of church strengthening. So I get to travel around the East Coast and just walk alongside pastors and leadership teams and support them and try to equip them with the tools that they need to be healthy, really, is what our goal is. We want to see healthy churches. And then, of course, my work with 95 Network has been such a joy to do Vision Day at several different times, and that's been fun. And then to walk through the Soul Care Essentials Conference, both in walking through it with you and then taking it and teaching it myself in a couple of settings. So it's just been a joy to see, kind of that beauty from ashes type scenario where I felt like I might have been done with ministry, but God said, no, I just needed you to get rid of a bunch of junk so that you could do what you actually were wired to do. And that's kind of my journey over the last few years and how I've been able to connect in a lot of ways with a lot of churches, and specifically through 95 Network. Just seen some amazing things happen.
When I met you, we tease about this now, but you said it earlier, you were in a dark spot. And
Yeah.
honestly, there were times, and I've told you this, but there were times I was worried that you weren't even going to make it as a person, because you
Yeah.
were just so discouraged, so depressed. And I kept thinking ministry should never happen this way. It was never intended that we would turn out this way.
Right.
And so that kind of is a springboard to where we are now. Now, the reason you and I became friends was I was working the Unstuck group, and I was a coach. And so we, through a coaching relationship. And so one of the things, I wish more people would take advantage of coaching, whether it's our coaching or some other form of coaching. And we'll even talk about that some in the content of what we're going to cover. But just because of the relationship, just because of having someone to connect with and be in relationship with, I've told this many times, and I probably will keep talking about it because I don't want others to go through it. But dude, I used to lay on the floor of my office when I pastored and cry for a friend. I mean, laying in the face down in the carpet, going, I don't have anybody. I would join networks, and after I joined the network, I'd end up leading it, and I didn't join it to lead it. I wanted to just to receive, And so you and I both, and I've got you by a few years, but we just want to spend the rest of our life being available, pouring into people. I saw a thing on Twitter today where someone said, you know what, and again, it's a direct quote from Scripture in 1 Corinthians, but we don't need any more teachers. We need some fathers.
Yeah.
That's just what we need. And so I think our relationship somewhere in there, and I'll tell you what solidified it for me was the first time you took me to Raising Cane's to get chicken. Once that happened, when a South Carolina boy gets good chicken, and especially in Ohio, you got him, man. And you did that to me.
I know how to make friends.
You did really good. So to set things up today we want to talk about, we have now available, I don't have a drum roll to play, but we now have online available the Soul Care Essentials materials, the conference, and also a new follow-up thing that we've created. And we'll talk about that because you've really been instrumental in that. It's available today. So literally people can purchase the conference. They can purchase the online materials, go through it just with their own staff, with their own team, and then implement the follow-up process that we're going to talk about in their own church, and never have even sat through the conference live. Now, we'd love for you to be there live because it's been really special what's happened with it. And so we're going to kind of talk through really how it came about. 95 Network has been doing conferences for years and years and years. And our most popular conference up until really this side of the pandemic is a conference we call the Blueprint, 5 Core Actions for Healthy Growth. And it talks about how to help your church develop leaders, have clarity in your mission and vision, how to define your discipleship pathway, how to really communicate well both in and outside the church. And then also we wrap that day up talking about how to create a healthy volunteer culture. And that's a great conference, and it's been very well received, and we've taken thousands of people through it. But we met together as a team a couple of years ago. Well, we tried to come together. We didn't get to last year, but we tried to come together and just sit down as a team and talk about where we are, where we're going, kind of map out where 95 Network's headed that year. And as we sat and talked, we realized, and you were the catalyst for this. Man, pastors are shot, leaders are done. They and so to be very transparent, you have much more of a heart for soul care than I did. And you're much more pastoral than I am. I understand that, and I'm good with that. I'm not, it's just all how we're gifted. And you kind of you kind of pushed us, if I would say it this way, guys, we need to do something to help pastors with soul care. And so we literally brought back together you and a few other people on a couple of occasions. And that's how we started this track to create the Soul Care Essentials conference, and now the online content. Because we would hear pastors say, all of a sudden, when before the pandemic, man, we're going wide open, a conference. In fact, in February of 2020, I was gone 25 out of 29 days. I don't like doing that, but it's just the way it all fell out that year. And then we come to an abrupt stop because, they asked us to quit meeting in person. Yeah. And I and you both continued to do vision days, even during the shutdown part of the pandemic. But as things begin to open back up, we start trying to roll conferences back out, and we start hearing things like from pastors like, you know what, I'm not really interested in coming to a conference like that. I'm just trying to get through the day. Or I don't want to learn about mission and vision. I'm not even sure I want to stay in ministry anymore. And so by hearing that feedback, and then you just being intuitive, we knew we needed to develop this conference. And so we did. What was it going on in your mind back then when we were kind of dealing with this, and you were pastoring as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, the pandemic had played a big role in pastors were forced to turn off the go, bigger, bigger, mindset. And instead they started to say, okay, wait a minute. We got to just figure out how to get through this week. And, but visionary leaders don't like to think like that.
Nope. Nope.
And so they really, I think it was a disruption in the way we did everything, and disruptions can cause pain. That's really what they do, because they change everything. And in the process, pastors realized, I think, that they had been going so hard that they really had not taken care of themselves in the process. And so now all of a sudden, when you dump this massive stressor into the mix, you're going to see all the spots where you are not living up to what you need to do. And you're going to see all the weak spots in your life. And so I just was in talking with different pastors and hearing they were exhausted. They were just tired. A lot of them were saying, I don't know if I'm going to finish, in ministry. I think I may look elsewhere. This is too hard. This is too much. And in my mind, I started thinking in terms of really what pastors need now is formation, not information.
That's good.
And that's where I started thinking, okay, what does that look like? What does it look like to help pastors learn not more info from the Bible, but how could the Bible start to form them and to form their souls in such a way that they can begin to replenish that empty tank that's in their soul, instead of constantly having to drain it and then running on empty most of the time. That's kind of where it started.
I talked about that in my book about running on empty and what it'll do to you. And I'm, the thing about all of this that we talk about today, this comes out of my personal experience. I think one of the things that makes 95 Network unique is that those of us in leadership either have pastored small churches or are still involved in those. And for me, I did 12 years, man, 30 people to 300. And in the 8th year, we have a horrible split. And then we followed back to 150. And then 4 years later, we closed it. It was not healthy enough to hand off to anyone. And then it started, I was already spiraling emotionally. And I want to say this too. My family didn't know that. Those closest to me did not know that. I remember when my wife read my book, Stalled, she cried because there was things in there she didn't know that I was dealing with emotionally and personally. Because and that's the way we've been trained.
Yeah,
we've been told, you have to be Superman. You can't let them see any chink in your armor. You can't let them know that you're, when you're sweating. You have to always have the answers. And what the pandemic did is it caused a huge reset. Yeah. And the things that we were dealing with churches before the pandemic are still the same things, except they no longer can hide it. And if you pastored a small church or even a medium-sized church during the pandemic, you got beat up bad. Yeah. I always say this: whatever decision you made was wrong. If you meet in person, that's wrong. If you don't meet in person, the devil's directing your ministry. If you wear a mask, you're in fear. If you don't wear a mask, you're unloving. And everybody has an opinion. And to be very honest, a lot of pastors are not necessarily gifted as strong leaders, so they got knocked around like a ping pong ball. And so we begin to see a pattern that emerged. And I like to say this: when the pandemic happened, if you remember, it was about 6 weeks before Easter. And so what happened was we all had Easter to focus on as a distraction. We got to get ready for Easter, got to plan Easter. What can we do for Easter? But then after Easter, and it was like, we're Americans. This is supposed to be over now. And it wasn't.
That's right.
And that's when I really saw the depression. That's when I saw I don't know what to do. That's when you start getting squeezed to produce something that is not within you. And what I mean by that is most of our pastors were not trained to lead. They were trained on how to preach and pray, and they do a great job with that. but they were not trained on how to deal with unruly board members or how to direct mission and vision when it really matters. And what I mean by that is, when I grew up, you went to church because you go to church. That's what you do. That is no longer the case. And so we don't have that automatic default anymore. So anyway, that kind of sets the stage of what we saw, what we inherited, what we thought, man. And so we started working on it. And so we had, I think I brought some of you guys back in February and a few more back in March, got an idea. And then I went and I just said, okay, I got to format this thing. And so when I created the Soul Care Essentials conference piece, my thought was, what do I wish someone would have told me when I was pastor? When I was out there and I'm crying for a friend and all that stuff, what do I wish someone would have told me? And so we developed it into three different sessions. I think the coolest thing about this conference is it's only a half day.
Yes.
It's just like, come on, folks, you can make it to a half day conference and you get free lunch.
Yeah.
It starts at 9 a.m. It's over at 12:30. You have lunch on site, and then you can leave if you want to, or you can hang around and pray. We make ourselves available to talk and to pray. And so what I'll do in my part right here is I want to kind of talk through these sessions, and then we're going to throw it to you more toward the end, because you've developed a 6-week follow-up process, which is everybody's excited about that, man. I had people even back in the summer when I was doing the conference going, this is all great, but man, there needs to be a follow-up. I said, well, I've got my man, Jason, here. And so you developed it, and we've got it. And so it all works together. And again, you can do the Soul Care Essentials conference and the follow-up, the 6-week follow-up. You can do all that and never have attended the conference in person, because we now have online. So if you were coming to the conference, or if you're watching it on the online version, the first session deals with your private life. And what we really we're addressing, as we just discussed, what's going on inside of you, kind of like where you were when you and I met.
Right.
What caused you to open up is what I guess. You didn't know me from Adam, but you opened up and talked to me. What caused you to do that to begin? Because that's how we began to go, man, this guy's not good on the inside.
Right. Yeah. I think what caused me to open up is that, honestly, I was at a point where I had nothing to lose by opening up. There was nothing left for me to hide, because it was all going to be exposed, all my weaknesses, and I didn't have some sin in my life that was, it was just, I was struggling as a leader, trying to make decisions, and I was overwhelmed. And because I was working outside of my sweet spot in ministry.
Yeah.
And so that's really, and I didn't know that at the moment, but honestly, I reached out and I opened up, because I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I mean, if this guy thinks I'm an idiot, well, he can just join the club. Everybody already does. So, I might as well just be open, honest, and vulnerable and see what happens. And obviously it turned out pretty good.
Well, I'm glad you made that decision. And so when you sit down at the conference, one of the things and you brought this up to kind of before we dive into session one, we should spend a few minutes talking about how you can become hard-hearted from doing the right things.
Yeah.
Usually if you hear the phrase, oh, he's hard-hearted or she's hard-hearted, it's because they've gotten into some kind of arrogance or pride or sin or something. But we spent some time talking about the fact that, hey, the disciples reached a point where Jesus looked at them and told them on 2 occasions in the book of Mark, why are you so hard-hearted? And they became hard-hearted from doing the right things. Yeah. And it goes back to what you said earlier about the fact that, you can do ministry and you can be giving out information, but you're not being, there's no formation happening in you. And a lot of us know that to be true. And so after we deal with the fact that, hey, it's possible that you're sitting in this room today or you're watching this video today from being hard-hearted. So be open, as Jason was, to, be transparent, and let's get you whole. Nobody wants to go to a doctor that won't tell them the truth. You may not like what the doctor tells you, but you don't, if you've got cancer, you don't want to go to the doctor and then say, oh man, you're looking great. Everything's wonderful. And then you don't want that, but we do that in ministry a lot, Oh, yeah. We really do.
We like to hear people tell us how amazing we are, even when we feel like crap. We want someone to come in and say, oh no, you're doing great. Just keep going. You're fine. That's what we want on the surface.
Yes.
But when you peel that layer back and you start thinking, wait a minute, that person's telling me that, but I don't know that that's true. I don't believe it. So I'm sure they don't either. And so then you start actually realizing, wait a minute, there's some stuff going on inside.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the way you formatted the conference, the first thing we deal with is our private life. That's you got to start there.
Yeah. I've always said this, and today things are different on this side of the pandemic, but like, where's a pastor supposed to turn?
Mm-hmm.
When a pastor's going through stuff, who do you go to? I've told this story about me going to the board member who told me I don't want to hear this.
Yeah.
It's who do you turn to? You can't unload all that on your spouse. You certainly don't want to unload it on your kids. If you tell other pastors, they leak it out sometimes.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where we were in me personally that caused me to develop this. And so we spend that first session. It's a 40-minute session. Then we do a 20-minute breakout around tables where people can work through this together. Just people that you come either to the conference with or you meet for the first time. And the first thing we want to talk about is we just want to talk about the fact we want to give you some protectors in your life. So I call them private life protectors. And the first one is the word accountability. And when I say accountability, for me, if I ever said accountability back in the day, it was a negative word. It's kind of, somebody's going to lord over you and call you out. And, Promise Keepers was the one that started that whole thing about get together with a group of guys and spill your guts. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. No. But no, true accountability is developed inside of having true love for each other. You got you and I can be accountable to each other because I know you love me and you I love you. Yeah. And exactly. So thank God we don't have any problems, or we would have to. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So, but we can be transparent with each other. And so you've got to have accountability. And then that kind of leads to the second thing we talk about. And again, I'm just skimming over it today because we still want you to get the resource. But we also talk about another accountability, a life protector is coaching or counseling, and those are two different things. And how do you view the difference between coaching and counseling?
Counseling, well, let's see. Coaching is when someone comes alongside you and really you set the agenda for the coaching relationship. You set the goals. You say, this is what I want to do. And then that coach comes alongside you and says, okay, now let me help you stay on track, stay on target, give you help you connect with resources. But a coach really is coming alongside you and walking with you, to where a counselor is a trained professional in a clinical sense. The coaches that I lead and that I do, they are all trained, but not in a clinical setting.
Sure.
And so you can deal, and a counselor is going to deal more inwardly. What's going on inside of you? How is that impacting then the relationships around you? Because like you said, we get all this stuff inside of us and we don't know where to dump it, but it still leaks out of us onto our family, onto our spouse, onto the people we lead. And so we need to talk to someone who can help us peel back some of those personal layers and really delve into what is going on inside.
I don't think I'd be here today leading 95 Network if I had not gone to a counselor. After my sabbatical accident a few years ago, I was completely broken. Could not put it back together because there was stuff inside of me that I didn't even know was there. And I had already written a book called Stalled, Hope and Help for Pastors Who Thought They'd Be There by now. So I thought once I finished the book, all this stuff is out. But it just uncorked it. And so, and everyone knows my friend Bob Hamp in Texas. I went and spent a week on his couch, and it changed my life. Yeah. So if you're listening today and you've thought about, man, I need help, I need to reach out, man, I'm giving you permission today. Find a counselor. Go to another town if you need to. Reach out to the Full Strength Network. They're one of our strategic partners, and they're overwhelmed. I'll tell you now because so many people are reaching out for help. But get help somewhere. You just weren't designed to do it on your own. So we spent some time talking about that, and then Jason, the one area that I did not expect to get pushback. That I get the most pushback from, without a doubt, in the whole conference, is this next point of a private life protector. It's called observing Sabbath. Yeah. When I look at pastors and tell pastors, God expects you to take a literal day off every week, they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing in the world. We start talking about the fact that you need the Sabbath. There's nowhere in scriptures that says there's an exception if you're in ministry. And I get so much pushback. You know how sometimes when you're talking to people and you tell them something and you're telling the truth and they know you're telling the truth and they're going, but I'm not going to do
that. Yes.
And so I just really am amazed at the amount of pastors who think because they quote unquote work on Sunday that don't set aside another day during the week is a Sabbath. And the Lord instituted Sabbath. The Father instituted it in creation.
Yeah.
And I've always said there are two things God's given us that don't make any sense in the world. One is tithing, and two is Sabbath. It makes no sense to give away 10% of your income, but you do that because you acknowledge who the source is. Well, it doesn't make any sense to take a day off. You should keep working, huh? But no, you take a day off and you are reminded who your source is. And so you've done some conferences too. Have you had pushback in this arena?
Yeah, I have had some. Most people on the outside nod approvingly, and it's kind of that
Good,
they nod
brother.
saying, "We agree, we agree." I mean, we're not going to do it, but we agree that that's exactly true. And some of the ways I try to dive a little deeper into it at times is to say, "Hey, listen, this is what Sabbath is. This is a time where you can cultivate some habits to avoid burnout in the long run. This is a chance for you to practice gratitude, where you can just sit and be thankful. This is a time where you can find beauty. Go take a walk. Go look at, find beauty and celebrate, engage wonder, right? Those are some of the things that I try to work into my Sabbath practice that can help you move, because I mean, burnout leads to cynicism. And we don't want a bunch of cynical pastors. And so to safeguard yourself, you practice Sabbath and you engage God just for you, not because you want to do something else, not because you want to, do some legalistic thing. You have to do this because you are trying to engage God in a new and fresh way.
That's exactly right. And we just really don't do a good job with that. One of my issues that I deal with is, I enjoy reading, but I don't read a lot. And it's because I got the vibe from my dad that wasn't real work. So I mean, most pastors are like, dude, but seriously, I mean, I have to struggle with guilt when I'm reading because I should be up doing something.
Right.
And that's kind of the way, with Sabbath, those who don't Sabbath, that's where they kind of get to where they get to. And I've even said this, I know one of the issues we talk about is, should pastors go on sabbatical? And I think sabbaticals are great. A lot of lay people and people in your congregation do not understand why you get to take 6 or 7 weeks off or a summer off or whatever and get paid, and they don't. But I will tell you this, if you Sabbath every week, you'll see much less of a need for a sabbatical. So we hang out there and talk about that. And then we close that session out talking about confronting insecurity. And we could go into a whole conversation right now, but we only have so much time on the podcast. But the reality is if you're an insecure leader, you tend to sabotage your own organization. And it's just what happens, because you need to bring it to where you're comfortable. And so we do that. We finish that session, and then we're done. That's the first session. We break out around the tables, and we allow and really the meat of our conference happens around those tables, where we've provided questions, and those who've attended work through those questions and for the next 20 minutes. And so that does session 1, and that's kind of the overview of it. We're going to go through session 2 in just a moment. Before we do that, though, we're going to take a short break, and then we come back. We're going to talk about the next 2 sessions, because I want to allow enough time for you to dive into the 6-week follow-up. So take a short break. We'll be right back. And we're back here with Jason Allison talking through the Soul Care Essentials materials. We have now made Soul Care Essentials our conference. We made it available online now. And so we're just kind of giving you an overview in case you would like to get it, of what's available. So we've done the first session is about your private life. The second session we call your personal life. And that's about your relationships, your spouse, your marriage, your parenting, friendships, and so we spend some time and we talk about what we call personal life priorities. And the first one is this: managing your calendar. You'd think that'd be simple, but most of us don't do that very well. Have you ever struggled with that particular issue?
Yeah. I have. And some of it's, part of it is when you see your own value based on how productive you are, and you see your own value and significance based on how busy you look, then you tend to let your calendar fill up with stupid stuff because at least you look busy. Yes. And so it's more than just do this to be a better worker, to produce more. Yep. It's called, this is teaching you and to replenish your soul by structuring the rhythms of your life around what is best and most healthy for you. And you have to own that, because if you don't, someone else will. That's the thing with your calendar. If you don't take control of it, someone else will, and it will probably be people you don't want controlling it.
That's exactly
and
right.
so you have to step up and do it. And we go through some things that are, tips and tools and things you should do. And it's really, I like that part. And I've gotten a ton of positive feedback on that. Pastors just saying, I never thought of it that way.
One of the things that happens to us, and I talk about this in stalls, is because we compare ourselves to others. But if you're in a small church, you can't do everything that a large church does. You're not expected to. And what I have noticed is that most small churches are known for doing 20 things poorly instead of one or two things really well. And again, it's because we feel like we have to be busy. So you just can't live that way. The second thing we talk about under the personal life priorities is pursuing your spouse. There's so much negative impact of ministry on marriages. You must make it a priority, and you got to focus on your marriage. And we spend some time on that. The third one that we talk about is training your children. There's a lot of folks listening right now would even identify with this, that they lost their kids to ministry, and that's just a sad thing that never should have happened. So we give you some practical things to do there. And again, this entire conference is very practical. And then the last session of the second, the last priority of the second one is having friendship intentionality. When Promise Keepers came out, this is my point of reference for the first time I ever heard this. But when Promise Keepers came out, they said that 70% of all pastors do not have one close personal friend, and that's like 20 years ago that stat came out. 6 months ago, we're recording this now in late 2023. So it'd be in the spring of 2023. George Barna released a figure and said basically the same thing's still true. It's that 70% of pastors do not have one close personal friend. That was not what we're called to do. That's sad. I get it, but you know what? You've got to pursue it if you're going to have it. You've got to pursue it. And so we spent some time talking about that, and then that is session 2. And we do a little breakout around that, and then we come back and we dive into session 3. And the third session, it's more about your professional life. And one of the issues that we deal with in there is just helping pastors to understand, okay, so you weren't trained, you didn't get trained like you needed to, or as we said earlier, hey, they taught you how to read the Bible, study, prepare to preach, but nobody taught you this other stuff. Well, learn it.
Yeah.
How about that? Instead of sitting around and going, well, I didn't learn this. Nobody taught me this, And so professional life pursuits. The first one is just get some practical training. And we give some ideas about that and how to help with that, and kind of walk you through some ideas just to help you, go get training. Don't get training just where you're good, but also get some training in areas where you're weak. Learn how to divide up those responsibilities and pass them off. Then this is a fun session. We get into the next one and we talk about being bivocational and the benefits of being bivocational. Man, it gets really interesting at this point.
Yeah.
As we record this, the youngest baby boomer is now 59. The baby boomers are retiring and dying, and they've been your givers, attenders, and they finance your church, and they've been your servers. That generation is moving on quickly. And what we've discovered is a lot of churches they are already forecasting financial shortfalls. So it might be good for you to consider being bivocational. And we talk about the benefits of that. And again, we're not going to give away everything that's in the conference at this moment now. And then the last thing we talk about, and you were on this podcast, is we talk about the word completion. A few years ago, you and I, along with some guys on our team, Bobby Lewis was one of those guys. We were talking about pastors, how to decompress after Easter. And Bobby introduced this idea of completion. And I said, what are you talking about? And Bobby said, in ministry, you never really get to complete anything. And man, that resonated with me. I thought, man, this is so powerful. And so we literally sit down and give you some practical things to do to help you complete things. How does that particular session go over when you teach it?
I get so many positive comments on that one section. People are nodding their heads, raising their hands saying, yes, I agree. Because they get so frustrated with, even discipleship. When are you done discipling someone? You're not,
when they get to heaven.
Exactly. and then you got to do their funeral. So it's one more thing you got to do in the week, right? Like, I mean, that's
So
the
busy.
thing, is you're never done. And Sunday comes every week, whether you want it to or not. And so there's just this feeling of I'm always busy, never done. And when basically what I see happening in the session is we give people permission to do something that they can finish and then celebrate it.
Yes.
And I never realized this. Like when I was looking through this and teaching it even a couple of times, I realized I've done this in the past because I just intuitively knew I needed to complete something, but I didn't know why. I didn't stop and think about it. So when you stand up and say, listen, you guys are always doing never finishing, what would it look like if you took a day, once a week, whatever it is, did something that you could finish? And I can hear this audible like sigh of relief in the room when people are like, oh, that would feel so good. How could we do that? I'm like, do a puzzle, finish it, and then take a picture of it and post it. I don't care what you do, finish something, and then just sit back and enjoy it. Reward yourself for finishing something. And man, just see, it's like a weight rolls off people's back when they start thinking about, and then they get creative and start thinking about all the things, and then they really get energized. And that's so fun to watch.
For me, growing up building houses with my dad, that completion is a part of what you do. And I did not realize the effect that this was having on my life till Bobby mentioned it that day. You never get to, you pour into a family for 5 years, and then they get mad at something you preach and they go to another church. It's just crazy. So anyway, that's the last part of that session. And then we're done. It's lunch on site. And as I said, we'll hang around the afternoon and spend some time praying. But then Jason has come along now and created what we call the Soul Care Essentials 6-week follow-up. Walk us through what that's all about and how we can use it.
Well, the way it's designed is basically, especially if you and a few other people sat through the conference.
And this could be live or watching the new online.
Exactly. And then basically you get a chance to say, okay, that was great. That was a lot of information. And, most pastors are great about receiving things, and they're great about taking notes and then putting it on a shelf or in a file and never doing anything with it. And so we decided we need to do something that will help them implement some of the things that they learned. So for the next, and it's 6 sessions if you do it every week or every other week. So, it might be 6 weeks, it might be 12 weeks.
Which way do you think is the best? Would it be best to do 6 straight weeks?
It kind of depends on the group you're with.
Okay.
But generally speaking, I would say 6 weeks is going to be better, because you're going to actually, work through stuff and you won't forget it. And also if you miss a week, you're not out for an entire month, like, every week on this. And there's a short video intro that just kind of gives you a quick, hey, here's what you're going to think about today. And then there's just a little bit of stuff to look at, and then questions for you to process together as a group. The great thing about this is you don't have to bring in a 95 network coach to lead this. You can just lead it with a group of your friends, a group of your, colleagues, whatever it is, and you can just go. You don't have to wait for you don't have to fill out a bunch of paperwork. All right. You just get it and you go and you say, the 4 of us, the 6 of us, whatever the number is that works for you, we're going to meet in the conference room for lunch, or we're going to meet at Arby's for lunch every week for the next 6 weeks. We'll watch the video ahead of time, or, we could do it via Zoom. Like I was going to ask you, can you do it doing Zoom? Yeah. If you do it via Zoom, it works just as well, because you can watch the video and again, the video is like 3 minutes. Okay. So it's not like this big, long, huge thing. And then and it's content from the Soul Care Essentials conference that you then dive deeper into, and you really start talking about the practical implications of, okay, that was a great tip, but now how do I dive that deeper so that I can actually establish a rhythm in my life, or wrestle through this identity issue that has surfaced because I've noticed I don't Sabbath, or I notice I don't. How can I restructure the rhythms and deal with some of those things?
And it also just gives you an opportunity to open up and be transparent. Sometimes what keeps us from being transparent is we don't know how. Because again, we've been trained, we're not supposed to be that way. So someone's listening going, well, I would love to open up to someone, but I literally don't know how to do it. This is a good springboard for that. This is a good opportunity for you to be able to go, hey, you know what? Time out. I need to talk through this right here. And that's what I love. That so far as we've been doing the Soul Care Essentials Conference for almost a year now. as far as in person, and we have a lot more coming up because of the relationship that's begun with Compassion International, where they're actually sponsoring the Soul Care Conference next year. It's just awesome. But what we've discovered is it's often, even in the conference itself, it's often just a springboard of a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
You may be talking about the need for Sabbath, and then you get the pushback thing. And it's kind of comical at first, because I'll always say, I get a lot of push, but then all of a sudden it reveals some deeper issues. And I'm excited to hear about the deeper issues that are going to be revealed in the 6-week follow-up.
Yeah. And we deal with questions that are related to, the private, the personal, and the professional life. And these are questions right out of Scripture. Like, these aren't just psycho things. These are, that first section, we start asking questions.
It may help you if you are psycho, but
well, yeah. But we part of the meditation part of this is we go to Genesis 32, where Jacob is wrestling with God, right? And okay. I know a lot of pastors right now that feel like they're wrestling with God. And what does God do? He says,
I think a lot of people feel like he won.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He's just kind of holding them down.
Exactly. But when God did win and he held him down, what did he say? What did he ask him? What is your name? Right. He said, and I think a lot of us need to really stop and think, what is our name? How are we seen? What are the things about us that we, call who we are? And is that true? Because in the midst of that wrestling, he went from the supplanter, the liar, to Israel, one who wrestles with God and prevails. Like, and even the Hebrew there could be one who wrestles for God. And so it's an interesting thing to think about. Who is God calling me to be? And what does that look like? And then to have other people around you to affirm that and to say, yes, this is what we see happening, in your life, what God is. That's like the magic of the cohort is you've got a few other people who you've trusted enough to work through this, to say, okay, this is what I think my name is. This is who I think I really am. And you get that feedback from others saying, well, let me tell you some other things I see in your life that I think you're forgetting, because these are so vital and I see God at work there. And that's why the cohort and doing it over 6 weeks is a great way to take the lessons and the things we learned in the conference and then help ingrain them into our life.
There's no one you believe more than yourself. So you can sit around with a group of people and they can tell you, you're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. And all you got to do one time is go, I'm not. And you'll always believe yourself.
Yep.
And so we want you to pull out of yourself bad beliefs, where you're in error, false beliefs, areas where you've been beating yourself up. And being able to be honest and transparent. And look, I don't expect everybody just to go spill their guts with anybody in a group, but we will show you the value of when in James it says, to get healed, you have to confess your faults one to another. There is a part of being a believer, being in the body of Christ, for freedom to come. This is what happened in my counseling. And again, it goes back to how we started this conversation. You can have a hard heart, not just from doing wrong things. You can get a hard heart from bad experiences, or it not turning out like you wanted it to, or in ministry, or in doing the right things, and it not working, or feel like you're wrestling with God and he's just holding you down. You can get hard-hearted that way. And so what we want you to understand is this: you got to get honest. You got to get transparent. And when I went to counseling, that's when I was able to understand how to confess some misbeliefs I had about myself. I mean, and then the other thing we learned at 95 Network, we've been dealing with, for a while now in podcast, is to deal with trauma. Trauma doesn't go away.
Nope.
You got to intentionally focus on that trauma and work a positive belief or a positive remembrance against the negative. And you just can't seem to do that by yourself.
Yeah, the second week of the cohort that we do a little meditation on Mark 5, where Jesus confronts the man who's possessed with the demon. And there he says, what's your name? But he's asking the demon. Yep. He's not asking the man.
Yep.
And so we talk about what are those lies that you have believed about yourself. Maybe you've even told to yourself, and wrestling through that and saying, what are those? And let's just name them. We're not judging. We're not, it's not, oh, I'm a terrible, but no. What are those? And then what do we need to replace them with?
And who knows, you may have someone in your cohort, it may be you, but you may they have fallen off into some really bad stuff, and
Right.
and they still need to get free. And so God can use even this opportunity to help them walk in freedom. So that's the Soul Care Conference, the 3 sessions, then the 6-week follow-up process. We obviously could spend a next hour talking through everything that's there, but we don't want to do that because we want you to get this. We want you to get the resource. We wanted to come alongside you to help you, to encourage you, because we're going to always continue to provide soul care through 95 Network. But we would love to get back to helping some folks with some strategic planning and vision and mission and stuff like that too, because we got a world to reach, But
it takes both.
It takes both. It takes both. And so I'm excited about it. I'm so thankful that really this conversation happened almost 2 years ago, and we developed this process. We've been, the conference has been happening now. Now we've got the follow-up. Now it's online. I'm excited about the testimonies we're going to hear in the future moving forward.
I can't wait to hear them.
Now you've been doing, you've done 2 or 3, because you're a facilitator of the conference. Tell me a little bit about your feedback as we go to wrap up the podcast today that you've been hearing. You've alluded to it a couple of times today.
Yeah, most of the feedback has been, wow, that was such good stuff. I needed that so badly right now. And, we kind of say at the beginning, we're not here to tell you need to pray more, pray harder, read the Bible more. That we assume as a pastor, you're probably already doing those things. We're going to come alongside you and say, okay, what are some healthy things that you need to think about as you are doing this formation of yourself? What are some of those things that are just practical on the ground I can put in place starting today? And that's what I hear is the feedback is, yeah, you know what? I walked away with 3 or 4 things I'm going to start doing tomorrow in the way I plan my week and the way I do this. And so very practical is really the feedback I keep getting is this made sense. You didn't try to tell me all the terrible things about myself. I didn't come in and leave feeling guilty. I came in and I felt loved, and then I felt equipped and then challenged to go do it. Yeah. So that's been the feedback I've gotten.
Well, I appreciate you being part of the team. I appreciate the fact that you do this conference. You actually are our presenter for it. And I can't wait to see what God does with it in the new year as we roll into 2024. We are there as we record this podcast, and we just are excited to see what God's going to do with it this year. If we can help you in any way at all, whether you just need to talk through, maybe you could host the Soul Care Essentials Conference. Maybe you would just want to get more questions about getting the online, how to work through it. Please feel free to reach out to us here at 95network.org. You can go, actually just email me or Jason. Well, both of our emails are just, Dale or Jason at 95network.org. And and I'll put that in your show notes as well. But we just want to help you. I think about, okay, anytime you do something like this, what is the end game? What do you see if this is successful? What has it done for somebody? Well, for me, first of all, I want to see someone who has freedom. I want to see someone who is a believer, who's leading a church, leading an area of ministry, who lives in freedom. And it's taken me 60 years to get there, which is sad, but it's just the fact. I want to see them in a thriving marriage if they're married. I want to see them in a thriving relationship with their kids. And I want to see them understand that, Jesus just wants them to do ministry from him and not for him, and to begin to enjoy life. I believe our best days still are ahead of us for the church. And but you got to lead from a healthy soul, because we've always said this at 95 Network. It takes a healthy leader to create a healthy organization. What do you see, Jason, for you? And we'll wrap with this. What do you see as far as your end game, your goal for the Soul Care Essentials Conference?
Yeah, I mean, part of my vision is to see every neighborhood needs a healthy church. And so I want to see every neighborhood have a healthy church in it. And a healthy church doesn't mean a big church, doesn't mean, it doesn't mean anything specific due to size. It means it's a healthy church that can help them see Jesus, know Jesus, and love Jesus. And the only way we can have healthy churches is if we have healthy pastors. And so I want to see this happen through the Soul Care Essentials Conference, through all the things that 95 Network offers. I want to see pastors getting healthy so that they can lead, as you said, from a relationship with Jesus.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.